Even if you're pro-choice, you should also be pro not being an idiot. Seriously, you can't have a life of your own making without having the ability to kill a baby? Without being able to kill a baby, your life is being written by someone else? You don't get to kill your toddler. I'll go ahead and say it. If you think you can't live a life of your own making without being able to kill a baby, you're a garbage human being, and so is everyone who cheers for you.
What I felt the Lord say is that Christianity is a love story. It is a story of the love of God to man.
Let me say something about Harry Potter. Warlocks are enemies of God. And I don't care what kind of hero they are. They're an enemy of God. And had it been in the Old Testament, Harry Potter would have been put to death.
Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Islamic Defense Podcast. So, welcome back. Today we're talking about our favorite psychopath, Mr. David Wood. He recently released a video where he is very happy to report that a terrorist in custody has confessed that he is apparently a big fan of David Wood. You know, any normal or sane person would be disgusted by the fact that he has a terrorist for a fan, but not our Davy. You know, not only is he not ashamed of this, he's actually proud of this. You don't believe me? Here, take a look.
A jihadi who was just convicted of multiple terrorism-related crimes in the UK praised me for my accuracy in my videos about jihad. Praised me.
You know, when an YouTuber or someone with influence gets associated with terrorists or such like-minded people, they usually denounce them. For example, PewDiePie once got associated with the New Zealand mosque shooter. Basically, the shooter of the New Zealand mosque basically confessed and said that subscribe to PewDiePie. And he then months later made a video where he basically denounced this terrorist and told everyone how disgusted he was by his actions. Here, take a look.
Disgusting! The Christchurch shooter said subscribe to PewDiePie. Out of the respect for the families and victims involved, I chose not to address it any further than on Twitter, where I disavowed the actions taken that day and I gave my sincerest condolences to everyone affected. To have my name associated with something so unspeakably vile has affected me in more ways than I let shown. I just didn't want to address it right away, and I didn't want to give the terrorists any more attention. I didn't want to make it about me, because I don't think it has anything to do with me. To put it plainly, I didn't want hate to win.
And this is how a normal person should behave. And yet, when it comes to David, he is actually proud of it. I mean, not only is he proud of the fact that his misinformed, distorted, radical views on Islam is the same as that of a terrorist, but he is actually promoting it. This man is sick and disgusting. So I have decided something. I'm going to start a new series just on David Wood, called David Wood Lies. Here, inshallah, I'm going to list and count all the times David Wood lies in front of camera from now on. Inshallah, I'll also count and list every time he's being a hypocrite in regards to Christianity. Inshallah, I'll also count every time he commits a fallacy. So, let's get started.
A jihadi who was just convicted of multiple terrorism-related crimes in the UK referred to me as a hardcore enemy of Allah, but praised me for my accuracy in my videos about jihad. A man has been convicted of planning a terror attack at London tourist hotspots just over a year after he was cleared of attacking police with a sword outside Buckingham Palace. Mohio Sunith Chowdhury, 28, from Luton, spoke about targeting attractions, including Madame Tussauds, the Gay Pride Parade, and a tourist bus. Former Uber driver unwittingly revealed his plot to undercover police. He also bragged to them that he had deceived the jury at his first trial. Chowdhury was cleared of a terror charge in December 2018 after slashing police with a sword outside the Queen's London residence while shouting Allahu Akbar. A jihadi A jihadi.
Why the fuck you lying? Why you always lying?
This is a lie. This is not what a jihadi is. Now, in one of his recent videos, David Wood quoted Islam Q&A to make a case against Islam. Here, take a look.
Fortunately, the sheikhs at the fatwa site Islam Question and Answer were asked to comment on this topic. And instead of whining, they actually answered the question. For instance, the sheikhs at the fatwa site Islam Question and Answer were asked to comment on this topic.
So, since he has full confidence in IslamQA.com, let's see what they have to say regarding jihad. And here's what they said. So, according to Islam Q&A, they said that jihad is of two types, the non-physical and the physical. Since this terrorist was not doing any type of non-physical jihad, quote-unquote, let's see what physical jihad against the kafiruns is like. So, physical jihad against the kafir, or the disbelievers, becomes obligatory in 4 cases, which are: number 1, when the Muslim is present in a jihad situation, when the enemy has come and attacked a Muslim in their land. This is number 2. Number 3, when the ruler mobilizes the people, they must respond. And number 4, when a person is needed and no one else can do the task except him. They quote Sheikh Ibn Uthaymin. This is what the Sheikh had to say regarding jihad. Jihad is obligatory and becomes farda ayn if a person is present where fighting is going on. This is the first of the situation in which jihad becomes an individual obligation. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the verse, O you who believe, when you meet those who disbelieve in a battlefield, never turn your backs on them. And whoever turns his back to them on such a day, unless it be for stratagem of war or retreat to a troop of his own, he indeed has drawn upon himself wrath of Allah, and his abode is hell, and worst indeed is that destination. You can find this verse in Surah Al-Anfal, chapter number 8, verse number 16. So jihad is only allowed when you are in a situation where there is already fighting going on or battle going on. Last I checked, there was no battle going on in London where this terrorist was planning his attack. So, yeah, let's continue. Again, Sheikh Uthaymin said, the second situation in which jihad becomes an individual obligation is when a city is besieged by the enemy. Then he has to fight in the defense of the city. Because when the city is besieged, there is no alternative but to defend it. For if the enemy is going to prevent people from leaving the city or entering it, and prevent provisions from reaching it, and other things which are well known, then in this case, the people of the city are obligated to fight in order to defend their city. Now, the last I checked, London was not being attacked by anyone, and so this also doesn't apply. Again, the Sheikh continues. The third situation is when the leader tells the people to mobilize. The leader or the imam is the highest authority in the state, but he needs not necessarily be the leader of all Muslims, because there has been no leader of all Muslims or a khilafah for a long time. The Prophet ﷺ said, listen and obey, even if you are ruled by an Abyssinian slave. So if a man becomes a leader, then his word is to be heeded and his commands are to be obeyed. You can read about this in the Sheikh's book, Al-Shar Al-Mukti, or his father book. Anyway, this is, yeah. So you can find this in chapter 8, page number is 10 to 12. So again, the last I checked, the Queen of England or the Mayor of England, which is a Muslim by the way in this case, which is Sadiq Khan basically, and he did not tell this guy to slash a police officer while shouting Allahu Akbar. You know, neither of them did that. So his leader didn't tell him to do this. So, and finally the last one is when a person is needed and no one else can do the task except him. Again, last I checked, the Muslim Ummah did not need this guy to slash a police officer with a sword while shouting Allahu Akbar. Also, he's not an expert in sword fighting, last I checked, so unless I'm mistaken. Now, some may very well say this is just a modern Muslim apologetics. Surely this is not what Islam teaches. But let's see what Islam teaches. So in the Quran it says in Surah Al-Baqarah, fight in God's cause against those who fight you, but do not overstep the limits. God does not love those who overstep the limits. You can read about this in chapter 2, verse number 190. Here this is quite clear. You can only fight those who fight you. One of the most earlier commentators of the Quran is Ibn Abbas, who is the cousin of the Prophet ﷺ. He interpreted this verse as prohibiting aggression against all categories of peaceful people. He said, "Fight in the way of Allah, in obedience of Allah, whether in the sacred precinct or in other places, against those who initiate fight against you. But begin not hostilities. Lo, Allah loveth not aggressors. He does not love those who initiate fighting, whether in the sacred precinct or in other locations." The Prophet ﷺ said in a Sahih Hadith, "Verily, the most tyrannical of people to God, the exalted, is he who kills those who did not fight him." You can find this hadith in Musnad Ahmed 16,376 and 50,943, version number 26, page number 298. This hadith has been authenticated as Sahih by Abu Bakr al-Haythami in his book Mu'jam al-Zawad. Hadith number is 11,731, version 7, page number 174. So according to both the Quran, the Prophet, and the scholars, and Islamic US definition of jihad, this guy is not a jihadi, but a common criminal. So, because he wasn't, all the criteria that they lay out for a jihadi, he matches none of them. I mean, he wasn't present in a situation where fighting was going on. London was not being attacked by anyone else, so he had no reason to fight. The leader of London, or the Queen of England, did not tell him to fight that soldier, so that also doesn't apply. And he's not a specialist in sword fighting, and no one needed him to slash that police officer with a sword. So none of these criteria apply to him. So this guy is just a common terrorist and not a jihadi. So this is the first lie of Mr. David Wood. So 1 point for the lie count. You know, it's quite funny because we're not even 1 minute in and he's already lying. He has already started lying. Very bad, David. But either way, let's continue.
But in short, this man, for lack of any more descriptive term, immersed himself in the lectures of Anwar al-Awlaki and other jihadi preachers, and other jihadi preachers, and other jihadi preachers.
It's time to stop! It's time to stop, okay? No more! Where the fuck are your parents? Who are your parents? I'm gonna call Child Protective Services. It's time to stop!
Another lie. So there cannot be any jihadi preachers because this is not jihad. As I just showed, according to the Quran, the Prophet ﷺ, and of course the majority of the scholars, this is not jihad. And he's not a jihadi. You know, this is interesting because there's a list in the American Muslim website where he compiled a list of thousands of Islamic scholars and other Muslim intellectuals who have all condemned terrorism. So basically they have listed thousands of scholars who have all condemned terrorism with references and proof that terrorism is not part of Islam. I will put the links below so you can check them out. And these are all Islamic scholars, so this is not like lay people either. There are some intellectuals who are not scholars, but it has a lot of thousands. They list a lot of Islamic scholars, like thousands, and many Sunni scholars as well, and not just Sunnis, from very different aspects as well. So it doesn't matter how many times you bark like a dog, David. According to Islam, this is not jihad. So we have our second lie. Now let's continue.
Let's read the part about what jihadis think of me.
This is the third time he is lying. Again, he is not a jihadi.
The Independent reports. He also relied on videos by a Christian preacher who claimed to explain jihad and vehicle attacks by presenting Islam as inherently violent. How could anyone claim that Islam is inherently violent just because Allah commands his followers to fight anyone who doesn't believe in him?
Here's what we're going to do. We're going to read a violent verse from the Quran, Surah 929, and we're going to examine the context of the verse, and we'll see what kind of impact these contexts have on our interpretation of the verse. Surah 929 reads, "Fight those who believe not in Allah nor the last day." Notice it doesn't say fight people who attack you. It says fight those who believe not in Allah, "nor hold that forbidden which hath been forbidden by Allah and his messenger." So if you don't forbid the same things that Islam forbids, such as eating pork, Muslims are commanded to fight you. "Nor acknowledge the religion of truth," if you don't acknowledge that Islam is superior, "from among the people of the book." The people of the book are Jews and Christians, "until they pay the jizya," until we pay tribute to Muslim leaders, "with willing submission and feel themselves subdued." That doesn't sound very peaceful and tolerant. It sounds like a clear command to Muslims to fight anyone who doesn't believe the same things Muslims believe.
This is another lie. We have already established what the Quran says regarding fighting. In Quran chapter number 2, verse number 190, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala already says that we can only fight those who fight against us. He doesn't need to say it over and over again, because we already know this. Also, Ibn Abbas also confirmed the same thing. Also, another thing is to note is that the way we understand the Quran is through the words and action of Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala himself mentions this in the Quran. He says, "O you who believe, obey Allah and his messenger, and turn not away from him while you are hearing." You can find this in the Quran, chapter 8, verse number 20. Ibn Kathir says regarding this verse, Allah commands his believing servants to obey him and his messenger, and warns them against defying him and imitating the disbelievers who rejected him. You can read this in Ibn Kathir's tafsir of chapter 8, verse number 20. Now, David should have no problem accepting this from Ibn Kathir, because he himself says that Ibn Kathir is one of Islam's greatest scholars.
Islam's greatest commentator of all time, Ibn Kathir. Islam's greatest commentator of all time, Ibn Kathir. Islam's greatest commentator of all time, Ibn Kathir.
So, what did the Prophet say? Let's take a look. Again, I'm going to quote the same hadith as before. "Verily, the most tyrannical of people to God, the exalted is he who kills those who did not fight him." Again, you can read about this in Muslim Ahmed 16,376. So here we see that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala despises people who kills innocent people, who did not fight them. And this is consistent with the verse, chapter number 2, verse number 190, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that fight those who fight you. Nowhere do we see that Muslims fighting random innocent people. So here David is committing the special pleading fallacy. He's basically making a special case for chapter 9, verse number 29. He's completely ignoring other verses which says only to fight people who fight Muslims. He's also ignoring the Prophet's sayings and tradition. So again, let me put this argument into logical form. Premise 1. David Wood claims, according to his theory, that that Quran verse, chapter 9, verse number 29, is talking about fighting random innocent people. Premise 2. If we find anything that contradicts this theory, it would prove his theory false. Premise 3. We see that the verse 2:190 and the hadith from Muslim Ahmed 16,376 both say not to fight innocent people, which contradicts David Wood's theory. Conclusion. Therefore, David Wood's theory about Quran verse 929, fighting innocent people, is proven false. Now let's continue. And later, In Sha Allah, I'll show that the verse was revealed regarding the aggressive Roman army. However, before we do that, let's count his lies. We have the lie number 4 and fallacy number 1. Now let's continue.
Since Surah 929 is clear, Muslims are going to have a bit of trouble reinterpreting it. Why? Because the Quran claims to be clear and perfect as is. Consider a few verses. Surah 6, verse 114. Shall I seek for a judge other than Allah, when He it is who has sent down to you the book fully explained? 11.1. This is a book whose verses have been made firm and free from imperfection, and then they have been expounded in detail. 12.1. These are verses of the clear book. 1689. And we have sent down to thee the book explaining all things. 27:1. These are verses of the Quran, a book that makes things clear. 41:3. A book whereof the verses are explained in detail. 57:9. He it is who sends down clear communications upon his servant, that he may bring you forth from utter darkness into light. Allah says that the Quran is clear, firm, free from imperfection, fully explained, expounded in detail. It explains all things. And this already rules out some of the standard Muslim reinterpretations.
It's really interesting that when David is interpreting the verse 929, he's using other verses from the Quran. However, if he is willing to do that, then why is he not doing the same thing with verse 190, where it says that you can only fight those who fight you? So what happened, David? Did chapter number 2, verse number 190 just vanish into thin air like magic? What happened? So basically he is committing the fallacy of suppressed evidence. He is ignoring verse 190 because it contradicts his theory. This is his second fallacy. However, let's continue.
For instance, Muslims in the West tell us that when Allah says, fight those who do not believe, he actually means fight people who are attacking you. But if Allah had meant fight people who are attacking you, he would have said fight people who are attacking you.
He did. As a matter of fact, that's exactly what is said in the verse 190. The real question is, why are you ignoring it?
Islam's greatest commentator of all time, Ibn Kathir, describes the historical context for us. I'll just read what he said in the Battles of the Prophet. Allah Most High ordered the believers to prohibit the disbelievers from entering or coming near the sacred mosque. So, non-Muslims were no longer allowed to take the pilgrimage to the Kaaba in Mecca. On that, Quraysh, that's Muhammad's tribe, thought that this would reduce their profits from trade. Therefore, Allah Most High compensated them and ordered them to fight the people of the book until they embrace Islam or pay the jizya. If they embrace Islam, they'll be paying zakat. If they don't embrace Islam, they'll have to pay the jizya. Either way, money starts rolling in. Allah says, O ye who believe, truly the pagans are unclean, so let them not, after this year of theirs, approach the sacred mosque. And if ye fear poverty, soon will Allah enrich you, if he wills, out of his bounty, for Allah is all-knowing, all-wise. Fight those who believe not in Allah nor the last day, nor hold that forbidden which hath been forbidden by Allah and his messenger, nor acknowledge the religion of truth from among the people of the book, until they pay the jizya with willing submission and feel themselves subdued. That was Surah 9:28-29. Therefore, the messenger of Allah decided to fight the Romans in order to call them to Islam. Why did Muhammad decide to fight the Romans? Because they were attacking him? They weren't.
This is a lie. This verse was revealed in regards to the Romans. And the Romans had already started a war with the Muslims. This is why Ibn Kathir mentions the Romans in his tafsirs also. The evidence of this can be found in Hadith in Tabari. Al-Tabari, he recorded that Mujahid reported concerning the verse, fight those who do not believe in Allah and the last day, that it was revealed when Muhammad and his companions were commanded with the expedition of Tabuk. Read about this in Tafsir Tabari regarding verse 929. Now, the expedition of Tabuk happened after the Battle of Muta. This battle started when the emissary of the Prophet ﷺ was murdered by the allies of the Romans. So, an innocent Muslim was murdered. So, Ibn al-Qayyum, he writes regarding this. The cause of the battle was that the Messenger of Allah, peace and blessing be upon him, sent Harith ibn Umair al-Azdi of the tribe of Lihab with his letter to Syria for the Roman king of Basra. He presented it to Sharhabil ibn Amr al-Ghazani, and he bound him and struck his neck. Basically, he chopped his head off. Never had a messenger of Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam had been killed before this. So the Prophet was really upset when he heard about this, and he dispatched an expedition. Basically, he sent armies to find out what happened. You can read about this in Zad al-Mad, page number 336. Also, Saifur Rahman writes in his book, The Sealed Nectar, the Prophet ﷺ had sent Al-Harith ibn Umar al-Azdi on an errand to carry a letter to the ruler of Basra. On his way, he was intercepted by Sharhabil ibn Amir al-Ghazani, the governor of al-Balqa, and a close ally to Caesar, or Kaiser, the Byzantine emperor. Al-Harith was tied and then beheaded by al-Ghazani. And then again it upset the Prophet. You can read about this in the Sealed Nectar, page number 245. Now this is how the Romans started a war with the Muslims. They beheaded an innocent Muslims for carrying a letter to the Roman king or the Roman emperor. This obviously led to the Battle of Tabuk, and that's when this verse was revealed, 929. Now one thing needs to be understood is that killing an emissary of another nation is a war crime. I think it's still a war crime, I think. Back then, this meant an act of war. No king or leader in their right mind would sit quiet after this. So we can see that this verse is definitely not referring to innocent non-Muslims. Again, this is consistent with what I already said. This goes perfectly with the chapter number 2, verse number 190. And the hadith in Musnad Ahmed 16,376, where it says that where it says not to kill innocent people.
And what was the historical context of Surah 929? The people of Muhammad's tribe were worried about how they were going to make money. In the past, they had made a ton of money from polytheists coming to their city. But now that Muhammad was in charge, the polytheists were no longer allowed to take their religious pilgrimage to Mecca. So the Quraysh wanted to know how they were going to pay their bills. Allah answered, "You're going to make money by fighting the Jews and Christians. They'll gladly pay you to avoid being killed." And Muhammad went out to fight the Romans. Surah 929, not according to me, according to Muslim sources, is a money-making scheme. Fight people until they pay you. Jews and Christians are a source of income.
This is a fallacy. Here he is committing the post hoc erga propter hoc fallacy. Just because the Quran verse was revealed after the Meccans complained about their financial situation doesn't mean that's what caused the Quran verse to come. I mean, if Islam was concerned about making its believers money, then why were the polytheists banned from coming to the city? I mean, wouldn't it make more sense from a money-making perspective to let the polytheists in the city so that they can make more money? Also, if the Prophet was concerned with making money for his followers, then why did he tell his followers to stay away from money and wealth? I mean, this is all he did. I mean, you can find countless evidence of the Prophet telling his followers to stay away from wealth, to stay away from luxury, to stay away from money, wealth, greed. There's a hadith in Sahih al-Bukhari where the Prophet said to his companions, Abu Hurairah reported, the Prophet ﷺ, peace and blessing be upon him, said, "Wretched is the slave of gold, silver, fine clothes, and garments. If he is given, he is pleased. But if he is not given, he is displeased." You can read about this in Sahih al-Bukhari 6071. Now let's put this argument in a logical form. Premise 1. According to David Wood's theory, Surah 929 is a money-making scheme. Premise 2. If we find anything that contradicts this theory, it would prove this theory false. Premise 3. We see that the Prophet of Islam ﷺ told his followers to stay away from money or greed in Sahih al-Bukhari 6071, which contradicts this theory. Conclusion. Therefore, David Wood's theory is proven false and he is proven to be a liar.
Now, think about this for a moment. What kind of person would I be if my wife comes up to me and says, "David, how are we going to pay our electric bill this month?" And I say, "Well, give me my baseball bat, I'll go beat some people up and make them give me their wallets."
I don't know, a psychopath? Then again, you already are one, and you already did this, so points for hypocrisy, I guess?
I decided to kill my dad. And I decided to do it in a brutal fashion, not a gunshot or anything. I was going to do it with a hammer. When I walked up to my dad, I had a hammer in my hand, and I hit him in the head 7 or 8 times with a ball-beam hammer.
How was he going to do this? Next verse. Fight those who believe not in Allah nor the last day, nor hold that forbidden which hath been forbidden by Allah and his messenger, nor acknowledge the religion of truth from among the people of the book, until they pay the jizya with willing submission and feel themselves subdued. But wait a minute, Allah. Aren't Jews and Christians the people of the book? Haven't they received true revelations? Aren't they believers? Why are we going to fight them? Next verse. The Jews call Uzair the son of God, and the Christians call Christ the son of God. That is a saying from their mouth. In this they but imitate what the unbelievers of old used to say, Allah's curse be on them, how they are deluded away from the truth. So we're going to fight the Jews and Christians based on what they believe. Have they done anything else? Next verse. They take their priests and their anchorites to be their lords in derogation of Allah. And they take as their Lord Christ, the son of Mary. Yet they were commanded to worship but one God. There is no God but he. Praise and glory to him. Far is he from having the partners they associate with him. Well, with all these false beliefs, it's almost as if Jews and Christians are at war with Allah, isn't it? Next verse. Fain would they extinguish Allah's light with their mouths. Notice it says with their mouths, not by the sword. This is referring to what we say. But Allah will not allow but that his light should be perfected, even though the unbelievers may detest it. Allah won't allow Jews and Christians to spread their false beliefs through preaching. How is he going to stop them? Next verse. It is he who hath sent his messenger, Muhammad, with guidance and the religion of truth, Islam, to prevail it over all religion, even though the pagans may detest it. Allah will put an end to the spread of false Jewish and Christian beliefs by making Islam prevail over them. How is Islam going to prevail? 929. Fight those who do not believe in Allah. Now that's the entire passage. It's pretty clear, isn't it? This would be a good time to ask our Muslim friends, based on the immediate context which we just read, why are Muslims commanded to fight Jews and Christians? Because of our beliefs, right?
This is another lie.
That is not the entire passage. Did you notice how this lying scumbag only read from verse 928 to 933 and completely ignored the later verses? That's because if he kept on reading he would be totally exposed. So he cherry-picked the verse to make his case. So let's read the verse that come right after verse 933, the last passage read by David Wood. O you who have believed, indeed many of the scholars and the monks devour the wealth of people unjustly and avert them from the way of Allah. And those who hoard gold and silver and spend it not in the way of Allah, give them tidings of a painful punishment. Quran 9:34. Here Allah is talking about corrupt priests who steal money from innocent people. Then Allah continues. The day when it will be heated in the fire of hell and seared therewith will be their foreheads, their flanks, and their backs. It will be said, this is what you hoarded for yourselves, so taste what you used to hoard. Quran 9:35. Here Allah continues to talk about these corrupt priests. Then he continues to the next passage which says, indeed, the number of months with Allah is 12 lunar months in the register of Allah from the day he created the heavens and the earth. Of these, 4 are sacred. That is the correct religion, so do not wrong yourselves during them. And fight against the disbelievers collectively as they fight against you collectively. And know that Allah is with the righteous who fear him. Quran 9:36. Here Allah tells Muslims when to fight. He also tells who to fight. He says, and I quote, and fight against the disbelievers collectively as they fight against you collectively. Which means Allah is telling the Muslims to fight those who attack them. This clear-cut contradicts what David said in the video. This immediate context makes it absolutely clear that 929 is talking about those people who were attacking Muslims and not random innocent people. Let me put this argument in a logical form. Premise 1. According to David Wood's theory based on the immediate context from verse 928 to 933, Quran is talking about fighting all non-Muslims. Premise 2. If we find any evidence that contradicts this theory would be proven false. Premise 3. If we read Quran verse 934 to 936, the passages that comes immediately after 933, we see that these verses confirm which non-Muslims should be disliked. For example, corrupt priests and when non-Muslims should be fought and which non-Muslims should be fought. In this case it's those that fight against them collectively. Which means Muslims can only fight non-Muslims that fight them. This clear-cut contradicts David Wood's theory. Conclusion: therefore David Wood's theory has been proven false and he is proven to be a lying scumbag yet again.
The way we understand the Quran is the way the Prophet ﷺ and his companion understood it. There's a hadith in Sahih al-Bukhari which makes it pretty clear who should be fought and why. It says in the hadith, My mother came to me, hoping for my favor during the lifetime of the Prophet. I asked the Prophet, may I treat her kindly? Now, the woman who's speaking, or man who's speaking, is a Muslim, and his mother is a non-Muslim. He replied, yes. Ibn Uyana said, then Allah revealed the verse, Allah forbids you not with regards to those who fought not against you because of religion or drove you out from your homes, that you should show them kindness and deal justly with them. You can read this verse in chapter 60. This is the verse number 8. The hadith is from Sahih al-Bukhari 5978. So this basically puts the final nail in the coffin. Here we see that both the Prophet and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran verse 68 are saying that you have to deal kindly with people who do not fight you. Again, this is consistent with the verse 2:190 and Muslim Ahmed 16,376, which says, fight only those who fight you. We see from the historical context from Ibn al-Qayyim's book Zad al-Mad that the conflict with the Romans started when the Roman Christians killed an innocent Muslim. So all of this is consistent. Nowhere does the Prophet or the Quran or any of the Sahaba say to fight innocent Christians or Jews for their religion. As a matter of fact, this becomes even more clear when we read Tafsir of Ibn Abbas, who said regarding the verse 68 that Allah forbid you not to help and have relations with those who warred not against you on account of religion and drove you not out from your homes, i.e. from Mecca, nor helped those who drove you out of it, that ye should show them kindness, that you should have relations with them and help them and deal justly with them by honoring your pledges with them. Lo, Allah loveth the just dealers, the just ones who honored their pledges. The latter are Khuza, the people of Hilal ibn Uamir and Khuzaima, and Banu Mudlij, who signed a peace treaty with Prophet ﷺ before the year of Al-Hudaybiyah, and which stipulated that they will not fight against him, drive him out of Mecca, or help anyone to drive him out of Mecca. It is for this reason that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not forbid him from having relations with them. Here we see that Ibn Abbas says that the Prophet made peace treaties with the non-Muslims, with certain non-Muslim tribes. Because they honored their treaty, the Prophet was allowed to have good relations with them. This is a clear contradiction to David's theory. I mean, if this is really the case that Muslims are supposed to fight all non-Muslims because of their religion, then why did the Prophet make peace treaties with non-Muslims? I mean, why is the Quran telling us to treat innocent non-Muslims kindly? Again, this is consistent with the verse 2:190, which says, fight those who fight you. However, those who don't fight you, be kind to them. This is the message of Islam. Let me put this argument in logical form. Premise 1. According to David's theory of Quran verse 929, Muslims are supposed to fight all non-Muslims because of their religion. Premise 2. If we find any evidence that contradicts this theory, it would prove this theory false. Premise 3. We see from Quran verse 68 and Sahih al-Bukhari 5978 and the commentary of Ibn Abbas regarding 68 that peaceful non-Muslims should be treated kindly despite their religion, which contradicts David's theory. Therefore, David's theory about Muslims fighting all non-Muslims is proven false, and David is proven to be a liar because he has read the Quran and he knows about the verse 68.
That's certainly how your greatest commentators have interpreted this clear passage. In Ibn Kathir's commentary on 930 we read, fighting the Jews and Christians is legislated because they are idolaters and disbelievers. Allah the Exalted encourages the believers to fight the polytheists, disbelieving Jews and Christians who uttered this terrible statement and utter lies against Allah the Exalted. As for the Jews, they claim that Uzair was the son of God. Allah is free of what they attribute to him. As for the misguidance of the Christians over Isa, it is obvious. Ibn Kathir says that fighting the Jews and Christians is legislated because they are idolaters and disbelievers. Where on earth did he get that idea? That's what the Quran says. So we're right back to Muslims fighting unbelievers simply for being unbelievers. The immediate context only supports the obvious meaning of Surah 929.
This is a disgusting lie against Ibn Kathir. This is not what Ibn Kathir said. In this verse, Ibn Kathir is specifically talking about Jews and Christians who are attacking Muslims. The evidence of this can be found in Ibn Kathir's commentary on the verse 2:190, where Ibn Kathir actually refutes this claim. He refutes a person who made this claim. He said regarding verse 2:190, the command to fight those who fight Muslims and killing them wherever they are found. Abu Ja'far ar-Raza said that Ar-Rabi bin Anas said that Abu al-Aliya commented on what Allah said. And fight in the way of Allah those who fight you. Abu al-Aliya said, this was the first ayah about fighting that was revealed in Al-Madinah. Ever since it was revealed, Allah's messenger used to fight only those who fought him and avoid non-combatants. Later, Surat Bara'ah, chapter 9 in the Quran, was revealed. Abdurrahman bin Zayd bin Aslam said similarly, then he said that this was later abrogated by the ayah, then kill them wherever you find them. 9:5. However, another thing to note is that even if Ibn Kathir did not refute this guy, according to most scholars this guy who narrated that Quran 2:190 was abrogated was a weak narrator. For example, Sheikh al-Bayhaqi said concerning it in Dalil al-Nubuwah 5:489 it was narrated only by Abdur al-Rahman ibn Zayd ibn Aslam, who is da'if or weak. Also according to Muslim Scholars.info he was a weak narrator as well. They quote a bunch of scholars who said the same. Therefore this narration about verse 2:190 being abrogated is weak. Which is probably why Ibn Kathir refutes him. However, this statement is not plausible, because Allah's statement, those who fight you, applies only to fighting the enemies who are engaged in fighting Islam and its people. So the ayah means, fight those who fight you, just as Allah said, in another ayah. In chapter 9 verse 36, and fight against the mushrikeen collectively as they fight against you collectively. This is why Allah said later in the ayah, and kill them wherever you find them, and turn them out from where they have turned you out, meaning, your energy should be spent on fighting them, just as their energy is spent on fighting you, and on expelling them from the areas from which they have expelled you, as a law of equality in punishment. So we can clearly see Ibn Kathir never said the Quran is talking about fighting innocent non-Muslims. If anything he refutes David Wood and the Quran quotes him without realizing.
Here, David is committing the fallacy of cherry picking again. Did Ibn Kathir say anywhere in the commentary that Muslims should fight innocent non-Muslims because of their religion? No. Again, he's talking about disbelievers who are fighting Muslims, same as the verse. We can see the evidence of this from the verse 256, where it reads, there shall be no compulsion in acceptance of the religion. The right course has become clear from the wrong. So whoever disbelieves in Taghut and believes in Allah has grasped the most trustworthy handhold and with no break in it. And Allah is hearing and knowing. Ibn Kathir says in his commentary regarding this verse, there is no compulsion in religion, meaning do not force anyone to become a Muslim. For Islam is plain and clear, and its proof and evidence are plain and clear. Therefore, there is no need to force anyone to embrace Islam. Rather, whoever Allah directs to Islam, open his heart for it, and enlightens his mind, will embrace Islam with certainty. Whoever Allah blinds his heart and seals his hearing and sights, then he will not benefit from being forced into coming to Islam. Now, does that sound like Ibn Kathir believes that all non-Muslims should be fought because of the religion? If Ibn Kathir really believed that, then why is he using this verse to mean that there is no compulsion in religion? Why is he saying that? I mean, again, this is completely consistent with the message of the Quran from 2:190, which says that fight those who fight you, but not innocent people. Treat them with kindness instead. Again, I'm going to put this argument in a logical form. Premise 1. According to David's theory, Ibn Kathir is saying in regards to verse 929 that all non-Muslims should be fought for their religion. Premise 2. If we find anything that contradicts this theory, it would be proven false. Premise 3. We see in Ibn Kathir's commentary of verse 256 that non-Muslims shouldn't be fought in regards to religion because there is no compulsion of religion, and this contradicts David's theory. Conclusion. Therefore, David's theory is proven false and he is proven to be a liar again.
But we still have to consider the extended literary context. What about other passages of the Quran? Surah 2:256 says, there is no compulsion in religion. Surah 109 verse 6 says, to you be your religion and to me be my religion. These verses are peaceful. How on earth can anyone suggest that 929 is commanding Muslims to fight people because of their beliefs, when the Quran is so tolerant of other people's beliefs? There's actually a simple solution here. The Quran lays down its own method of interpretation in Surah 2:106, where Allah says, whatever communications we abrogate or cause to be forgotten, we bring one better than it or like it. Do you not know that Allah has power over all things? Here we have the principle of abrogation. In Islam, if you have two verses that seem to contradict each other, all you have to do is figure out which one came last, and that's the one that still applies. The earlier verse has been abrogated or canceled. So, assuming you have a reliable timeline, it's fairly easy to resolve certain conflicts in the Quran. Now, the Quran says there is no compulsion in religion in Surah 2. It also says, fight those who do not believe in Allah in Surah 9. There's a conflict here. Which surah came last? The Quran isn't arranged chronologically, so we'll have to turn to the Hadith to find out. Sahih al-Bukhari 4364 declares, the last complete surah which was revealed to the Prophet was Bara. Surah al-Bara is one of the names of Surah 9. It was the last chapter of the Quran that Muhammad delivered to his followers. Some Muslim sources say the same thing about Surah 110, but that's only a few verses. The Muslim sources agree that Surah 9 was at least the last major surah revealed. And so if it conflicts with anything that came before it, what came before it was abrogated.
Lie. Another lie by Mr. Wood. This is not what abrogation means in the Quran. First, let me explain what an abrogation is in the Quran. So, abrogation in the Quran refers to the phenomenon of a later verse changing or altering a ruling established by a verse revealed earlier, either in whole or in part. Now, one example of this is the rules of the alcohol. So, the rules were established very slowly over time in multiple verses to make it easy on the Muslims of the time. However, this is not a contradiction. I don't know if any of you guys play video games now, but oftentimes in video games, you would have your main games, right? The main title. Then later on, developers would oftentimes release something called the downloadable content, or the DLC for short, which is an extension of the main game. Oftentimes these DLCs would add new characters or add new maps. Now, I mean, it does change the main game, but it doesn't contradict it. Like, it doesn't cancel it. Like, the DLC does not cancel out the main game, but expands the world of the main game. Like, it expands the main game. The abrogation in the Quran is something similar to that. While these abrogations don't change the rules, but it adds to it. There is a great article in the Yaqeen Institute that I want you guys to read. Here, Brother Justin Parrott explains it really well in accordance with the Salaf. Again, I'm going to go back to Ibn Abbas because he's the earliest commentator of the Quran, and this is what he understood about abrogation, and this is how he understood abrogation to mean. Ibn Abbas would frequently use the term abrogation, but many times in its partial, limited, or figurative sense. Al-Shattabi writes that Makki said that Ibn Abbas would mention several things in the Quran for which an exception was made, and he would say it is abrogated. You can read about this in Al-Shattabi, Al-Muwafakat, Al-Kahira, Dar ibn Affan, regarding verse 346. Al-Tabari writes regarding this that Ibn Abbas said that the verse 24-27, do not enter houses other than your own houses, was then abrogated, and an exception was given by the verse, there is no blame upon you for entering houses not inhabited in which there is convenience for you. In 24-29, you can read about this in Jami al-Bayan al-Tawfil al-Quran by Al-Tabari. Now, here we see what I was talking about earlier. If you notice, the verse 24-27 sent down a rule for Muslims that we shouldn't enter houses other than our own. However, later in the verse 24-29, an exception was made. An exception was made to this ruling, which is unless these houses are empty or vacant and no one lives there. So here we say that the verse 24-29 makes an exception for the verse 24-27, in which, in other words, it expands the ruling of 24-29. However, the ruling of 24-29 is not cancelled, therefore it's not a contradiction. And this already contradicts David's theory about abrogation. This shows that and proves that there is no contradiction in the Quran. The rules are expanded upon, sure, but it's not a contradiction. Abrogations, now the reason abrogations came is for the welfare of the people by bringing forth the rule most appropriated for a given situation. Making changes very slowly and gradually so it becomes easier for the Muslims. And this is the best way to do it because, like, you don't want to make rulings harder for the people. And this is how any education model should work, because beginning with easy lessons and then moving into more challenging and beneficial lessons of the students. Yeah, this actually shows that the beautiful nature of the Quran and the miracle of the Quran. It is applicable in almost any situation. There's great wisdom behind it. Now that you know what, let's put David Wood's theory to the test. If this is true, that this verse 929 abrogates all other peaceful verses, then we will see the Prophet's companions such as Abu Bakr, Omar, Muawiyah, etc. Following through with it, right? I mean, we would see them, if we look back at history, we will see them fighting all non-Muslims, if David Wood's theory is right. But do we see that? Now, when we look at history, do we see the Muslims fighting all non-Muslims after the Prophet's death? Because this verse apparently came last. Then if we look at the history after the Prophet's death, we should find the answer, right? So, after the Prophet died, did his companions all fought non-Muslims like a bunch of savages? Is that what happened? The answer is no. As a matter of fact, the opposite happened. For example, we know that Umar made peace treaties with various nations. One of his most famous documents is the Pact of Omar. Ibn al-Qayyum mentions the Pact of Omar in details in his book Ahkam Ahl al-Dhimma. You can read about this in Non-Muslims in the Early Islamic Empire, page 59 by Levi Rubin. Now the question arises that if this is really the case that 929 abrogates all other peaceful verses, then why did one of the Prophet's most closest companion like Umar radiallahu anhu made peace treaties with the Christians and Jews? How come he didn't interpret 929 to mean to fight all non-Muslims? How come he didn't fight all non-Muslims based on chapter 929? We also see the same thing with other companions. We also see more evidence of this from other companions as well, like Muawiyah radiallahu anhu. There's a hadith regarding Muawiyah radiallahu anhu which says, Sulaim ibn Umar reported, there was a peace treaty between Muawiyah radiallahu anhu and the Byzantine Romans. He was marching towards their country, and when the covenant came to an end, he would attack them. A man came on a horse while he was marching, saying, Allah is the most great, Allah is the most great, let there be faithfulness and not treachery. When they looked, they found that he was Amr ibn Abash. Muawiyah sent for him and questioned him. about that and why he was why he stopped them. Amr said, I heard the Messenger of Allah, peace and blessing be upon him, say, if one has a covenant with the people, he must not strengthen or loosen it until its term comes to an end, or he brings it to an end in agreement with them. Thus Muawiyah radhiyallahu anhu then returned with his people. You can read about this in Sunan al-Tirmidhi 1580. This hadith is graded as Sahih by Sheikh Albani. Now, when I first read this hadith, it kind of amazed me because can you imagine this happening nowadays? And I think about it, Muawiyah radhiyallahu anhu isn't like some random king. He is the emperor of the Islamic Empire. Like, he's a big deal. And here we are, probably one of the most powerful men, marching with his army. And then this random guy just comes in and just completely stops him on his track, simply by quoting a hadith. Can you imagine something like this happening nowadays? And this is the thing. And this is why Islam is a religion of peace, because oftentimes you see that atheists often, make the argument that religion causes violence and blah, 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 blah. But here, this actually contradicts their theory, because here we see that Islam as a religion actually stopped violence. Religion here is stopping violence, and this proves them wrong. Religion established peace here in this situation, and we can find many other situations like this. However, the Islamophobes and the atheists will never quote evidences like this. They will ignore it because it doesn't suit their agenda. But anyway, now there's a few interesting things in the hadith. Here we also see that Muawiyah radhiyallahu anhu made peace treaties with the Romans. Now, if this is really the case that verse 929 talks about fighting all non-Muslims, then why did Muawiyah radhiyallahu anhu make peace treaties with the Romans? I will tell you why. The reason why he did that is because of verses like two peaceful verses like 2:190, which says, fight those who fight you, or more specifically, the verse 861, which specifically commands Muslims to make peace with their enemies. And the verse says, if they incline to peace, then incline towards peace as well, and put your trust in Allah. Verily Allah is the hearing and knowing. You can read about this in Quran chapter 8, verse number 61. Ibn Kathir said regarding this verse that this verse cannot be abrogated because the Prophet ﷺ continued to act upon it as a legal precedent. You can read about it in Tafsir al-Quran al-Azim by Ibn Kathir. Ibn Taymiyyah also says, as for the oppressor who does not fight, then there are no texts in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commands him to be fought. Rather, the unbelievers are only fought on the condition that they wage war, as is practiced by the majority of scholars and is evident in the books of Sunnah. You read about this in Kitab al-Nawawut by Ibn Taymiyyah. He also mentions an ijma of the scholars regarding verse 2:190, which says, fight those who fight you. He says, I said this opinion that the verse 2:190 is not abrogated is the opinion of the majority of the scholars. It is the way of the Malik, Ahmed, Ibn Hanbal and others. The other opinion that the verse is abrogated is weak. Indeed, to claim abrogation requires proof, and there is nothing in the Quran to contradict this verse. Rather, what is in the verse is consistent with it. So where is this abrogation? Where is this abrogating verse? So basically, he refutes those who claim and brings evidence that a majority of the scholars are of the opinion that this verse was abrogated. These peaceful verses was never abrogated. You can read about this in Qaida Muktarash fil Kitab al-Kufr wa Muhaddan tuhum wa tahrim katlahum li mujarad kufrim by Ibn Taymiyyah. Man, that's a name. Anyway, so now if this is the case that this verse 929 abrogates all of the peaceful verses, then why are all classical scholars such as Ibn Taymiyyah and Ibn Kathir and majority of classical scholars all saying that verse like 2:190 and 861 have not been abrogated. Again, let me put this argument in a logical form. Premise 1. According to David's theory, the Quran verse 929 abrogates all other peaceful verses and tells Muslims to fight all non-Muslims. Premise 2. If we find any evidence that contradicts this theory, it would prove this theory false. Premise 3. We see that none of the Prophet's companions understood this verse 929 to mean fight all non-Muslims. As a matter of fact, they did the opposite. They made peace treaties in accordance with the peaceful verses of the Quran, which contradicts David's theory. Premise 4. We also see that classical scholars like Ibn Taymiyyah and Ibn Kathir have never interpreted verses like 929 to mean to fight all non-Muslims, which also contradicts this theory. Conclusion. Therefore, David Wood's theory about Quran verse 929 is proven false, and David Wood has been proven to be a liar and a scam artist. So he lied 2 times here. First, he lied about abrogation, and then he lied about 929, cancelling other verses. So 2 points for lying for David.
This means that earlier revelations that westernized Muslims like better can't overrule Allah's clear commands in Surah 9.
Lie again.
Where does that leave us? The Quran commands Muslims to fight those who do not believe in Allah.
Lie again.
We looked at the historical context. Muhammad's followers wanted to know how they were going to make money. The answer from Allah was that they would make money by subjugating Jews and Christians.
Lie again.
We looked at the immediate context, and we saw that all the reasons listed for fighting the Jews and Christians had to do with religious beliefs and practices. There wasn't a single word about Jews and Christians attacking anyone.
Lie again.
So where's the context that supposedly makes this verse peaceful? Doesn't exist. Seems like Muslim apologists have been writing checks the facts can't cash.
Lie again.
Well, there's one more context we haven't considered. The context of the Muslims who are telling us about Islam. Most Muslims in the West believe that Islam is peaceful and tolerant. Why do they believe that? It can't be because of what the Quran teaches. We've seen what the Quran teaches.
Lie again.
Muslims in the West believe that Islam is peaceful because the Quran isn't the only influence on these Muslims. Muslims are influenced by all kinds of things, by their families, by their teachers, by their friends, by the music they listen to and the shows they watch, by their genetics. Many Muslims are raised to believe in the same values I believe in. So they believe these values are good, and then they read these values, Western values, into their religion, even though their religion can't support these values.
Which Western values are you talking about, David? Is it the value of the Bible? If so, let's see what the Bible teaches. Let's start with the teaching of Jesus in the New Testament. Jesus said, "Do not think that I have come to abolish the law of the prophets. I have not come to abolish them, but to fulfill them. For truly, I tell you, until heaven and earth disappear, not the smallest letter, not the least stroke of a pen, will by any means disappear from the law, until everything is accomplished." Read about this in Matthew chapter 5, verse number 70 to 18. So we can see that Jesus is saying to his disciples that the law of the Old Testament must be honored. So Christians have to obey the law of the Old Testament. So let's see what the Old Testament says. You know, it's funny. A few days ago, David Wood made a video about abortion, and he was very angry at a Hollywood celebrity who was promoting abortion. Here, take a look.
Even if you're pro-choice, you should also be pro not being an idiot. Seriously, you can't have a life of your own making without having the ability to kill a baby? Without being able to kill a baby, your life is being written by someone else? You don't get to kill your toddler. I'll go ahead and say it. If you think you can't live a life of your own making without being able to kill a baby, you're a garbage human being, and so is everyone who cheers for you.
So here we see that David thinks that anyone who kills a baby is disgusting and vile. Now, or is a garbage human being, to quote him. And now, I know that conservative Christians are pro-life, which means that they don't support abortion. Now, does the Bible share this view, this same sentiment? Is the Bible also pro-life? Let's take a look. Let's read Psalms and see what it has to say about babies. I mean, surely we'll find some pro-life sentiments here, right? I mean... Yeah, let's read. "By the rivers of Babylon we sat and wept, when we remembered Zion. There on the poplars we hung our harps, for there our captors asked us for songs. Our tormentors demanded songs of joy. They said, "Sing us one of the songs of Zion." How can we sing the songs of the Lord while in a foreign land? If I forget you, Jerusalem, may my right hand forget its skill. May my tongue cling to the roof of my mouth. If I do not remember you, if I do not consider Jerusalem my highest joy. Remember, Lord, what the Edomites did. On the day Jerusalem fell, tear it down, they cried, tear it down to its foundation. Daughter Babylon, doomed to destruction, happy is the one who repays you, according to what you have done to us. Happy is the one who seizes your infants and dashes them against the rocks. You can read about this in Psalms 137, 1 to 9. I mean, dashing babies against rocks. It's wow. That's something. That also doesn't sound like a very pro-life. I mean, well, maybe, you know what, maybe the context will shed some light. Let's read some tafsir or commentary. Let's read the commentary of Matthew Henry. Let's see what he has to say. Here is what Matthew Henry said regarding this verse, more specifically the verse number 8 and 9. Matthew Henry was a 16th century Bible scholar. A little bit of historical context. So this verse was revealed after, I'm going to butcher this name, Nebuchadnezzar to successful siege of Jerusalem in 597 BC and subsequent campaigns. Inhabitants of Kingdom of Judah were deported to Babylon. In Babylon, they were held captive until the fall of Babylon in the year 539 BC. Psalms 137 is a hymn, basically. It's kind of like a poetry. Not poetry, it's basically a record in the form of a poetry. I don't know how to express it, but yeah, that's what it is. It's a hymn expressing the yearning of the Jewish people during the Babylonian exile. In its whole form of 9 verses, the Psalms basically reflects the yearning for Jerusalem as well as hatred for the holy city's enemies. Now, according to rabbinical sources, this Psalms is attributed this poem to the prophet Jeremiah. You can read about this in Potiphar's House, the interpretive life of biblical text by James L. Kugel. Now that we have the historical context out of the way, let's see what Matthew Henry has to say regarding this verse. Let's see what he says. The very little ones, and he's talking about the babies that the verse talks about killing, the very little ones of Babylon, when it is taken by storm and all in it are put to the sword, shall be dashed to pieces. Here they're talking about dashing babies to pieces. So, so basically, this is talking about when the Jews were in exile and their cities were taken by the Babylonians. And the prophet Jeremiah, he's basically prophesying that there will come an army who will come to this city. God will send an army to take revenge in the city, and they will, do these horrible things, destroy this town and basically chop babies into pieces and crush them into rocks. And that's basically what's going on here. And let's read further. And all in it are put to the sword, shall be dashed to pieces by the enraged and merciless conqueror. None escape if this little one perish. Those are the seed of another generation, so that if they be cut off, the ruin will not only total as Jerusalem's was, but final. So Matthew Henry, I don't know if he's a psychopath or not, like David, but he actually tries to justify this genocide, this disgusting act of killing babies, and he basically says that the reason they will kill the babies is because so that next generation does not survive. And what was their crime? Because their previous generation came and conquered the city. But the thing is that they had nothing to do with this. Like, the babies are innocent. But anyway, let's read. It is sunk like milestone into the sea, never to rise, as a destruction which should reflect honor upon the instruments of it. Happy shall those be that do it, for they are fulfilling God's counsel, and therefore he calls Cyrus, who did it, his servant, his shepherd, his anointed. Now, does this sound like the word of God, or does this sound like a horror movie? It actually kind of sounds like horror movie, like horror story. I don't know, like, does Christians like tease this to their kids? This is disgusting. But anyway, now remember, according to Christianity, Jesus is the God of the Old Testament. That means in Psalms 137, Jesus is the one who is saying, be happy when babies are crushed by rocks. He's literally saying that. I find it quite ironic how some conservative Christians are so pro-life. They go out, all this protest. And yet, when we look at the Bible, we see that the Christian version of Jesus has no problem smashing babies on a rock. Of course, this is the Christian version of the Jesus, not the actual Jesus, but still. And he even praises the people who are bashing babies into rocks and cutting them into pieces. Now, if you're a Christian, does that sound like a God who is all merciful? Is smashing babies into rocks the Christian way of showing mercy? Now, David, I have a question for you. Why is it okay for Jesus to praise people who smash babies into rocks, and yet it's not okay for Hollywood actresses like Michelle to get an abortion? Either killing babies is wrong or not. You cannot say abortion is wrong, and yet you're completely okay when Jesus has no problem with killing babies. According to the Bible, that is.
I'll go ahead and say it. If you think you can't live a life of your own making without being able to kill a baby, you're a garbage human being, and so is everyone who cheers for you.
Now let's put this argument into a logical form. Premise 1. According to David Wood's theory, anyone who kills a baby and those who support them are a garbage human being. Premise 2. We see that the Bible Psalms 137 supports killing babies. Premise 3. We know that David, being a Christian preacher, supports the Bible. Conclusion. Therefore, according to David's own logic, because he supports the Bible which supports killing babies, David is a garbage human being. Now let's compare this to what Islam teaches. Let's see how Islam treats babies and mothers. There is a hadith which says, Anas ibn Malik reported, the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, said, verily, I might begin the prayer and I intend to prolong it, but then I hear the crying of an infant. I will shorten the prayer as I know his crying will distress his mother. Source, Sahih al-Bukhari 678, Sahih Muslim 470. Back in the time of the Prophet, women used to pray behind the men in the mosque. So here we see the Prophet of God Muhammad, peace be upon him, would quickly finish his prayer when a baby would cry, because he didn't want the mother or the baby to be stressed. Can you imagine the virtue this man had? He was the Prophet of God doing the most important thing, but he still had the time to consider and care for babies and their mothers. He made sure they were not stressed as a result of him. Now let's compare this with the conservative Christian superhero Donald Trump. Let's see how he treats babies.
I have the biggest bank in the world as a tenant of mine in New York. The biggest in the world, a Chinese bank. Don't worry about that, baby. I love babies. So, we have the piggy bank. They have ripped us to shreds. Ripped us absolutely to shreds. Actually, I was only kidding. You can get the baby out of here. That's all right. Don't worry. I think she really believed me that I love having a baby crying while I'm speaking. I think she really believed me that I love having a baby crying while I'm speaking.
This guy literally told a mother to get out with her baby, while he is doing nothing but whining about China. Now if you are a Christian, be honest with yourself. Which is better, a religion that teaches you that every small thing of love and mercy matters, such as caring for your baby and the mother as Prophet Muhammad taught, or a religion that teaches you that babies being chopped into little pieces and being crushed by rocks is a good thing, as we just saw with Christianity? If you are a genuine person, I think the answer is obvious.
And with that, I'll end the video. Thanks for watching. Jazakallah khairan. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.